Welcome to War Bios, the podcast where we delve into the complexities of military history, and I'm your host, General Biography. Today we're going to explore one of the most pivotal campaigns of the American Civil War, the Atlanta Campaign. This series of battles was a crucial turning point in the war, as Union forces sought to capture the strategic city of Atlanta, a key transportation hub and industrial center for the Confederacy. By the spring of 1864, the Civil War had been raging for 3 years, with both sides suffering heavy losses. The Union Army, under the overall command of General Ulysses S. Grant, had made significant gains in the Western theater, but the Confederacy still maintained a strong grip on the Deep South. Atlanta, with its railroads and manufacturing facilities, was a vital prize that could give the Union a decisive advantage. The city's importance cannot be overstated. It was the linchpin of the Confederacy's logistical network, supplying arms, ammunition, and supplies to their armies across the South. In the months leading up to the Atlanta Campaign, the Union Army of the Tennessee, led by General William Tecumseh Sherman, had been pushing deep into Confederate territory. Sherman's forces had already secured key victories at Vicksburg and Chattanooga, and now they were poised to strike at the heart of the Confederacy. The Confederates, meanwhile, were led by General John Bell Hood, a seasoned commander who would stop at nothing to defend his native Georgia. Hood was known for his bravery and tenacity on the battlefield, but he also had a reputation for being impulsive and sometimes reckless in his decision-making. As the winter of 1863-64 drew to a close, Sherman's army was encamped in the vicinity of Chattanooga, Tennessee, where they had spent the winter regrouping and replenishing their supplies. The Union commander was keenly aware of the strategic importance of Atlanta, and he began making plans for a major campaign to capture the city. He knew that it wouldn't be an easy task, as the Confederates had heavily fortified the approaches to Atlanta, and the terrain itself was treacherous, with dense forests, steep hills, and swampy rivers. Sherman's army would have to navigate this challenging landscape while facing a determined enemy who would fight tooth and nail to defend their homeland. Meanwhile, in Richmond, Virginia, Confederate President Jefferson Davis was growing increasingly concerned about the situation in Georgia. He knew that if Atlanta fell, it would be a devastating blow to the Confederacy's war effort, and he ordered General Hood to do everything in his power to defend the city. Hood, in turn, began mobilizing his forces, including the Army of Tennessee, which had been battered but not broken in previous battles. The Confederates were well aware of the Union Army's strength and mobility, and they knew that they would have to use all their skill and cunning to hold back the tide of blue coats. As the Union Army of the Tennessee embarked on its perilous journey towards Atlanta in May 1864, Sherman's forces were met with unyielding resistance from Hood's Confederates. The first major engagement of the campaign, the Battle of New Hope Church, took place on May 25, 1864, in a dense forest where Union troops clashed with Confederate infantry and artillery. The air was thick with tension as the two armies exchanged volleys, the scent of gunpowder hanging heavy over the landscape. Despite being outnumbered, the Confederates held their ground with dogged determination, inflicting heavy casualties on the Union Army. This initial skirmish set the tone for the grueling campaign ahead as both sides dug in for a protracted struggle that would test their mettle and push them to the brink of exhaustion. The following day, Sherman's forces launched a series of flanking maneuvers, attempting to outmaneuver the Confederate defenses with a combination of clever tactics and brute force. However, Hood's troops proved resilient, adapting to each new challenge with a flexibility that belied their numerical inferiority. The Union Army was repeatedly repelled at the Battle of Dallas, fought from May 26 to June 1, 1864, as the Confederates cleverly utilized the terrain to negate the Union Army's numerical superiority. Rugged hills and forests became the Confederates' strongest allies, providing natural strongpoints that funneled the Union troops into killing zones and allowed the defenders to inflict disproportionate casualties. As the campaign wore on, Sherman adapted his tactics with a pragmatism born of experience, recognizing that a direct assault on the Confederate positions would be suicidal. Instead, he opted for a siege-like approach, gradually encircling Atlanta with a series of fortified lines and probing for weaknesses in the Confederate defenses like a master surgeon searching for the perfect incision point. This strategy allowed the Union Army to slowly strangle the city's supply lines while minimizing its own casualties and conserving strength for the final, decisive push. The Union Army's engineers worked tirelessly to construct elaborate earthworks, using every available resource to create a labyrinthine network of trenches, redans, and bastions that would protect their troops from the withering Confederate artillery. As the Union Army's siege lines tightened around Atlanta like a vice, the city's defenders grew increasingly desperate, their situation precarious and their options dwindling. The once bustling streets were now empty, save for the sound of artillery fire and the acrid smell of smoke hanging in the air. On July 22, 1864, Hood launched a bold counterattack at the Battle of Atlanta, hoping to break through the Union lines and relieve the beleaguered city. The Confederate Army, with its tattered flags and worn uniforms, poured out of their trenches like a mighty torrent, determined to shatter the enemy's grip on the city. However, Sherman's troops were well entrenched, their defenses bolstered by rows of earthworks and barricades that seemed almost impenetrable. As the Confederates charged forward, they were met with a withering hail of artillery fire, the Union guns blazing away like a deadly storm. The Confederates, undaunted by the fury of the Union artillery, pressed on, their courage and determination admirable but ultimately futile. The battle marked a turning point in the campaign, as Hood's army never fully recovered from the losses it suffered that day. The streets of Atlanta ran red with blood, the cries of the wounded and dying echoing through the city like a haunting melody. In the weeks that followed, Sherman's forces continued to constrict the city, slowly but inexorably tightening the noose around Atlanta's neck. The Union Army's siege line seemed to stretch on forever, a labyrinthine network of trenches and earthworks that appeared almost impregnable. On August 31, 1864, the Union Army breached the Confederate defenses at the Battle of Jonesboro, cutting off the last remaining rail line into the city. The sound of gunfire and explosions filled the air as the Confederates fought valiantly to hold back the Union tide, but ultimately, they were unable to stem the flow. With their supply lines severed and their situation hopeless, Hood's troops evacuated Atlanta on September 1, 1864, leaving the city to fall into Union hands. The capture of Atlanta was a crushing blow to the Confederacy, depriving them of a vital industrial and transportation hub. As Sherman's army occupied the city, they discovered the extent of the destruction caused by the siege, with buildings reduced to rubble and civilians struggling to survive. The streets were filled with the sounds of despair, the once proud city now lying in ruins. The fall of Atlanta also had significant political implications, as it helped to secure President Abraham Lincoln's re-election in November 1864. The news of the city's capture sent shockwaves throughout the nation, a stark reminder of the war's devastating consequences and the Union Army's unyielding resolve. That's all for today's War Bios. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, I'm General Biography reminding you to keep marching toward victory.